time comes when silence is betrayal. For we are deeply in need of a new way beyond the darkness that seems so close around us. And if we will only make the right choice, we will be able to transform this pending cosmic elegy into a creative psalm of peace. We will be able to transform the jangling discords of our world into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. We will be able to speed up the day all over America and all over the world when justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
So we're going to do something today that you may not have known was coming, but we're going to make a big difference in our world and make a big impact today, and we're going to do that together. So we decided months ago when we were looking at this season of time that one day wasn't enough to celebrate 20 years of being together, right? Our 20th anniversary, 20th birthday. So we've done a lot together over the last few weeks. The staff and I are going to go home and take a nap and shut the office down after this, and we're pretty excited about that. But today is week 5. And in the last 5 weeks, we've done a lot together. We've fed hundreds of people through a mobile food pantry. We packed over 2,000 bags to send home to kids on weekends in our local schools. We built 3 houses out in the parking lot. We prayed hundreds of hours inside of this building and then walked into neighborhoods and prayed for our neighbors. And today, we're going to release, our goal is 100 children from poverty, not just physical poverty, but spiritual poverty and relational poverty. And we're going to talk about all that today, and we're going to do that together. And it's going to be pretty powerful. All right, let me show you a picture, if I can. I took this picture when I was in the Middle East, when I was in Israel. It's not coming up again today. That's great. I was standing on the remains of Jericho, looking towards Jerusalem. If you saw the picture, you'd be so impressed, but maybe you'll see it here in just a second. Jesus describes this exact spot. Oh, there it is. Jesus describes this exact spot in Luke chapter 10, when he said, one day a man was walking from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell among robbers. And you can see that, can't you? Like if you're walking in that ravine, you can see how robbers might hang out and wait for some, poor schmuck to walk along and jump on them. And if you know the story from Jesus in Luke 10, that Jesus as a priest and a Levite, religious folks, were heading through that same area, maybe walking up to the temple, we don't know, and they passed by on the other side and didn't help the man. Then later, a Samaritan came along, traveling, also far from home, and just like the others, he came upon this man a distance from his house, but the Samaritan was moved, he said, with compassion, Jesus says. Luke uses the Greek word splagna for compassion. That's the same Greek word that Matthew used to describe Jesus when he talked about him being moved by the crowds with compassion. The priest and the Levite moved, the Samaritan was moved. That's a big difference. But he was traveling far from home, so the Samaritan didn't move to Jericho. He didn't quit his job. The Samaritan just took some money, about $100 worth in our day. Not nothing, but doable amount of money. And he asked a local caregiver to care for this man who had need because he didn't live there with the money that he provided there, and he went back to Samaria. So when the Samaritan was moved, he partnered with a local caregiver. When Jesus was moved, he called on us. He sent us. Jesus' story about the Samaritan moved the American pastor named Everett Swanson to found Compassion International. In 1952, he was in South Korea ministering to American GIs during the height of the Korean conflict. And early one morning, he saw Korean soldiers hopping in and out of a big truck, throwing bags of trash up into this truck and hauling it off right at sunup, before people began to see it, because they were beginning to have journalists from around the world. That was all kind of a new thing during the Korean conflict, and they didn't want them to see this trash. So they were going through the city of Seoul, throwing trash from around doorways up into this truck and getting it out of the way. But when Swanson got closer, he realized that the bundles were actually children, war orphans who had died overnight from exposure in the freezing cold temperatures. It wasn't trash, it was kids. So on his trip back home a few days later, back to America, Swanson just couldn't shake the imagery of soldiers tossing frozen kids up into the garbage truck like they were trash, but they weren't trash. They were kids. Now, he didn't feel called to move to Korea. He lived in America. After all, he was on his way back home when he couldn't shake these thoughts. But then he remembered Jesus' story about the Samaritan who partnered with a local caregiver and left him some money to cover things there while he went back to his home in Samaria. So Swanson used that model to found what we now know as Compassion International, that allows us in the developed world, America, Australia, England, other parts of the world, to partner with churches in the developing world to care for kids that move our heart, to care for kids that move the heart of God. Now, this has been a long-term relationship for Amy and I. We first came into contact with Compassion right after we first got married. I was a student minister up in Indiana, and we had a child that our youth group sponsored named Angel. And then Amy and I later visited Ecuador with Compassion in 2010, and then Amy and I traveled there again recently back in August of this year. So we've been with Compassion for a while. We personally sponsored 4 kids through Compassion, 4 different children for years because we believe in what they do. And since we had 4 children, we thought it made sense to sponsor 4 kids to hopefully set up some pen pal type situations and all of that. Now, to explain the work that Compassion does with children in the developing world, but more importantly, to give a picture of the opportunity that you and I have today, I want to introduce you to a little girl named Maite. I met Maite in 2010, and I want you to notice I haven't changed a bit in the last 13 years. I think COVID took something out of me. I'm not sure exactly about that, but I met Maite near her home in Guayaquil, Ecuador, and Guayaquil's a tough place. I would say you've not been to Guayaquil. That's not a tourist destination necessarily. It's a tough place. We landed there after a long flight from Atlanta, and we landed in the international airport in Guayaquil, and right around the international airport, I came later to understand, is kind of the American sector. So there's a block or 2 radius right around the airport where business people travel in and out, and it's really clean and really nice and really modern and really safe. But it's just a couple block radius. And so we landed at night, didn't see the rest of it, went to our hotel, which was one of the nicest hotels I've ever stayed in this American sector. Amy at the time, our children were toddlers, right? It's in 2010. And so I left my wife home with 2 toddlers while I went on this missions trip. And here I am staying in the nicest hotel I've ever been in my life. And my roommate at the time on this trip had a phone plan you could call internationally. So I used his phone, and I'm calling back home to my wife from the mission field, and she's like, "So how is it?" And there's like marble floors, and this is the nicest hotel I've ever been in. I was like, it's okay, it's fine. I hear kids crying in the background. It's fine, it's okay, you know. I'm roughing it. It's whatever. The next morning, we all got in this bus and left the American sector and drove across Guayaquil silently as the neighborhoods quickly went from first world luxury to third world extreme poverty. Grinding poverty, block after block after block after endless block. We all rode in silence at the shift that we just experienced. What we witnessed in Guayaquil was no opportunity, no infrastructure, no jobs, and most importantly, no hope. Even though I didn't have words to put to that at the time, what I found out later was they had no hope. Until we finally pulled up to this little bitty church, and all these kids started streaming out of the building with all their faces aglow, excited to see us. The same kind of excitement you would expect, like if Taylor Swift had been on our bus or something, but she wasn't on our bus, and yet they were so excited to see us because these children were sponsored through Compassion International, and they had hope. Lots of hope. And they had love from these adults who were pouring into their life, these caregivers, and the church there, and they had Jesus because of what was being done for them that we were making possible. I met Maite there back in 2010, and she's almost exactly the same age as my twins. I have twins who are seniors in high school now, and at the time they were 4. Remember the toddlers I left home screaming with their mother while I'm in the luxury hotel? Like those toddlers. Maite, if you had placed Kara, Erica, and Maite together and said they were triplets, people would have believed it. If you'd have said they were twins, they would have assumed it was Maite and Erica because Erica looked more like Maite than she did Kara, her twin sister. The only difference, the only thing separating these kids was that Maite was born in Guayaquil and Kara and Erica were born here. And I just wasn't okay with that. So in a rare moment, we didn't have a lot extra, and I hadn't talked to Amy, but I was like, she's got a sponsor. Does she have a sponsor? And I said, no. I said, well, she's got a sponsor now. We're going to figure it out. And of course, Amy was very supportive of all of that. We began sponsoring her that week. Fast forward to 3 months ago, Amy and I relived the same experience I had in 2010, very similar. Day after day, different cities, different little churches, the same hope coming out of those children, coming out of that building, on those same little faces coming out of those same kind of churches, because the work of compassion, the difference between those kids on the outside of that program and the kids on the inside of that program was stark. And you couldn't you couldn't undo what you were seeing. The last day of our trip, they brought Maite to Quito to see us. She had just graduated high school. And I knew as we're meeting her, she wouldn't have had education without us. Schooling is very expensive in Ecuador. It's all private. There's not public schools. In fact, most families in developing countries aren't able to send their kids to school. It's just too expensive. Or if they do, they send one of their kids to school and not the others, because they can't afford to send all of them. So they pick which one they think is the brightest, and they send them to school. And if they do that, many families have to choose between feeding all of their kids every day or sending their kid to school. So they'll say, we're going to send this one to school because we think they're the brightest, and that means you two will eat on Monday, and you two will eat on Tuesday, and then back to you on Wednesday, and every other day kind of thing. We just can't imagine. But Maite got school because of us. Maite loves to play soccer. She's in an intramural type league, and she's very active and very healthy, and she wouldn't have had health care without us. Health care is a luxury, a rare luxury in the developing world. In fact, when kids come to Compassion, almost immediately they're seen by a doctor to get evaluated and screened and things, and that's typically the first time they've ever seen a doctor, been under the care of a doctor. Maite has a vital connection to the local church. You really need to hear this. This is not just a feeding type ministry. Children in Compassion programs are all based inside of churches. They call them programs, but they're in churches. And they get about 400 hours of discipleship a year, spiritual development poured into them. In America, we have great programming for your kids. I would put our children's program up against any program that I'm aware of in terms of what they provide for your kids, but we're all so busy. So the average American kid gets about 40 hours of spiritual development from church. The average Ecuadorian kid in Compassion's program gets about 400 hours, 10 times as much. And because of our sponsorship, Maite's preparing to go to nursing school. She has this little business where she'll buy oranges and different fruit and hand-squeezed fruit juice, and she'll sell it in her little cart along the streets, and she's putting aside money to go to nursing school. A dream that would have simply been out of reach without us. Like the Samaritan in Jesus' story, Amy and I gave local caregivers a little bit of money, not nothing, but doable, so they could do for Maite what they couldn't do without me, and what I couldn't do without them, and what Maite couldn't do without either of us. Maite is the winner here. Maite's patience as a nurse will be the winner here. Maite's children will be the winner here because they won't grow up in the same kind of hopeless environment that she was forced to grow up into. While Amy and I were in Ecuador, we also met a young lady named Maria. Maria had just had her third child. She lived in this little house outside of La Cunga, Ecuador. And she had the cute little farm. She had a little bit of property. It wasn't very much property, but on this little, like a postage stamp type, subdivision type size yard. But in this little yard, she had a little pen for her, she had a couple pigs, and she had a little pen for her guinea pigs. They eat guinea pigs there, which is gross. I'll show you pictures if you want to see them. It's gross. And she also raised chickens. And she had all of that there, and she would feed them, like she would fix things by hand to make sure it was just exact right, because she's so proud of her little farm. And she was so happy. I don't think I've ever met somebody as happy as Maria. But if we had met her just a few months earlier, it was all different. A completely different story. Had we met her several months earlier, she and her husband at that point had 2 kids. She was pregnant with their third. And they didn't have extra, but they had enough. I mean, they were getting by. They were okay until her husband, who works construction, had an accident at work. And you see, there's no safety nets in the developing world. We have safety nets upon safety nets here. So they didn't have workman's comp. That's not a thing there. They didn't have health insurance. They couldn't afford that. The government has no safety nets. There are no safety nets. So in the developing world, you're kind of on your own. And her husband couldn't work without surgery, and they couldn't eat without him working. And they were in a mess. So she left one morning she slipped out of the house. Her husband had the two boys, little boys, and her plan was to go take her life. Not just because of depression, but because of practicality. She said, if he doesn't have to feed me and he won't have to feed this baby, everybody will be better off. The three of them will be better off without me here. So she was walking to the bridge that she planned to use, and she just happened to walk by this little church along the way, and a woman inside the church saw her noticeably upset as she walked by, crying, visibly crying. And so she ran outside and she asked Maria what was wrong, and Maria told her the whole story. And the lady from the church said, don't do that, we can help you. I promise you, we can help you. And you see that little church that she just happened to walk by didn't have Compassion's name on it, because none of the churches have Compassion's name on it. It's not about making Compassion a big deal. They make the church the big deal. They don't advertise us. They don't advertise Compassion. They advertise that church, because that church is changing their kids' life. The pastor, the people, they're changing their life. And so the church had support for her because they were being supported through Compassion. And they immediately placed Maria and her unborn baby in what's called their survival program. Several years ago, Compassion created the survival program because 1 out of 4 kids don't make it to age 4 where they can be sponsored. They're dying before that out of malnutrition or preventable disease. And so they created the survival program to help kids get up to age 4 so then they can be sponsored and go into the program. So someone came to Maria's house every week to give her prenatal checkups, the first medical care she'd had with her pregnancy. Every week they come in and give her health information and parenting education and spiritual support. They also train the moms in things like baking and farming. In fact, they gave Maria her first little pig and the guinea pigs, which are still gross, and the chickens, and she paid them all back. It was like a micro loan. She paid them all back with her first litter, so now she's free and clear and owns this little farm that she's using to feed her family and to make an income. Once a month, in addition to going every week to their home, once a month all the moms come to the church and they do a whole day of training and support and community and help. And they also get some food. You see the bag of food there on the right. We gave all the moms a bag of rice and beans and all this food they can use during the week. Now catch this. Maria, little Maria, you see how tiny she is, carries that large bag of food home as she walks home each month. Now, she didn't have to walk this time because we were there and we gave her a ride in the van we had, and it took us 20 minutes by van to get her home. She walks that to and from every month with a big bag of food on the front and her baby strapped to her back. And I've rarely seen anyone as happy as her because she has hope. I complain that the front spots at Walmart are taken. She walks what took us 20 minutes to drive with a bag of food and a baby, and I've rarely seen anybody as happy. Now, I want you to hear this because this is big news. We've not told you this before. In 2024, WellSpring will be partnering with an Ecuadorian church to bring a child survival program there to the church to help about 20 moms and 20 babies who are in desperate need right now. Maybe some of those moms right now are walking towards a bridge of their own mind, thinking that's their best option. Now, you don't need to do anything special to make that happen. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to give anything, because every time you give to WellSpring, a portion of that gets set aside to make an impact around here and around the world. And part of that money, a portion of that, $12,000 a year to be exact, is going to be used to launch this program next year, 2024, in Ecuador. We're being the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan, and we're doing it together. None of us could do that on our own. We're doing it together. We're bringing hope together. We're helping Maria together. And we're hoping in a couple years, once we get things off the ground and settled, we're hoping to go visit Ecuador together, and you can come with us and you can see that program that we get off the ground next year. And if you sponsor a kid from Ecuador, there's a lot of options today. We're focusing on Ecuador and Honduras. If you sponsor a kid from Ecuador, you can let them know that. Well, they'll arrange that, and they will bring that kid to you like Maite came to me, and you can meet your child that you sponsor. You ought to do that today. All right, now I can talk about Compassion for a while. You probably picked up on that. The reason is because I've been there. I'm a skeptical person by nature, but I've seen that. I know what happens when kids come from outside the program to inside the program. I see the stark difference. So I get pretty excited about it, but I know you've not been there, so I'm trying to figure out ways to help you grab that. And one of the ways we're going to do that today is I've got a friend of mine, a new friend of mine. We've just met today. Gerald Lorenzo is with us. And I promise you're going to want to hear Gerald's story. So Gerald, if you want to come on up, let's welcome him as he comes up to the stage this morning.
Thank you, Pastor. I'm so happy that I was thinking over there right now. And I'm so happy that I arrived here through the Nashville airport. And I'm going to depart from that same airport. And the reason it was because the last time that I was here in Tennessee, 3 weeks ago, I arrived through Knoxville, and I had to cross to Crossville. And you know what happened? When you cross to Crossville, there is 1 hour left, right? So you know what happened the day that I have to return to my city? I missed my flight. Yeah. So, but I'm good, and thanks God because He allowed me to be here and share my story with all of you. Let me tell you something. The way that I want to start talking to you about my story is just remembering a conversation that I had with my mom a few weeks ago. I was asking her about her story because I wanted to understand my own story. And some of the things that I discovered about her story is that she met her mother at the age of 19 years old. And the second thing is that she defines her father as a great man, but at the same time as an abusive man. So she said that she was abused by him physically and emotionally at the age of 20 years old. So she decided to try to find a solution. And the way that she tried to do that, it was being with a man. And that man, it was my father. And that was at the age of 20. So at the age of 20 of my mom, I was born, 1990. And what happened, it was that 4 years after that, my father, he just decided to leave the house and not be with us anymore. So from that age, my mom, she had to raise my brother and me all by herself. And I never knew what was never have to like to have a father. So that means for me that I had to deal with extreme poverty, with no money to eat, no money to dress, and no money to have an education. Unfortunately, I grew up in a lousy neighborhood in Santo Domingo where drugs, illegal weapons, crimes, and poverty were my daily bread. And during my childhood, I saw how the traffickers were selling drugs in the corner by my house. So one of the things that I want to share to you today is that due to that situation, I have to face a lot of things in my life. And I always say that do not having a father in your life, it is hard. But it is harder when you don't mean anything to your father. And that was what happened to me and also to my brother. So some of the things that I have to face in my life, it was me knocking the doors of my neighbors and asking them for empty bottles of Coca-Cola and exchanging those empty bottles of Coca-Cola for bread and milk at the grocery store just to eat the only meal of the day. Some of the things that I remember is me going to my school, walking, because my mom sometimes she say, hey, Gerald, today we got 10 Dominican pesos, and we need to choose between you taking that money for breakfast or you taking that money for transportation. I didn't have a bed to sleep on. Clean water, we didn't have clean water in our house. I always remember that we have to boil the water first in order to drink it. And some of the things that I remember is me selling juice and empanadas on the street to survive, but at the same time selling hot chocolates and cookies 4 a.m., 5 a.m. in the morning just to get some money to buy food and to have something in our house. So due to that situation, and because what I'm saying, I didn't have that father with us that can support me, I remember one day that I decided to call my father, and after 14 attempts, he decided to pick up the phone. And what happened, it was that he asked me to stop by a police station. And why a police station? because my father, he was a police officer at that time. So when I arrived to the police station 7 a.m. in the morning, I was waiting for him until 5 p.m. and he never showed up. And I don't know if you can imagine that, but I was a child that was in a parking lot of a police station waiting for my father for around 9 hours, and my father never showed up. That was my case. I remember that one of my dad co-workers called him because he saw me in the parking lot and he said, "Hey, are you Lorenzo's sons?" And I say, "Yes, this is me." And he said, "Let me call your father." So he called my father. And when he passed me the phone, I talked to him and I say, "Hey, I have been here since this morning, 7 a.m. in the morning. I didn't have breakfast. I haven't eaten anything." And his answer was, "Just go to your home. I'm going to call your mom. In other words, I don't care about you." And for me, believe me, that was one of the most frustrated days of my life because I was thinking like, why I'm living that kind of life. When I was coming back to my home, I was crying and I was trying to find something that can probably help me to feel better. But I haven't anything at that time. And I remember that when I arrived to my home, I fell down into my knees and crying to the Lord, I say, "Hey, Lord, let me tell you something. If you get me out of the situation that I'm living right now, I promise you that I'm going to serve you for the rest of my life." And I don't know how many promises you can imagine right now. I always say, whatever promise that you can probably imagine, that was the promise that I was doing that day. Because I was there and I was also saying, "Hey, Lord, if you get me out of the situation that I'm living right now, I promise you that I'm going to open a foundation and I'm going to help my community." I was trying to find a solution. I was trying to find something that can help me to have hope. So my mom, she was desperate. She didn't know what to do. And something that happens, it was that someone talked to my mom about a church that was close to our community. And she decided to go to that place. And in that church, they had a compassion program. So we are talking in the 90s. So they had a compassion program over there. Those people, they decided to go to my house. They decided to take some pictures about my situation. They decided to put me in a list of possible child that can be a sponsor. They create a child packet like those child packets that we have here, and they send them to London, United Kingdom. And over there in London, United Kingdom, there was a man in a church, like this church, that he said, "I want to sponsor Gerald Lorenzo from the Dominican Republic." And that was the moment when everything started to change in my life, because we found a place that provides food, uniform, and transportation. But I always say, we found a place that provides the best of the best, and it was the gospel of Jesus Christ. So through Compassion International, my mother, my brother, and I accepted Jesus Christ. And my mother today, she's a co-pastor in a church in the Dominican Republic. And my brother, he's also working as an external host for Compassion International in the Dominican Republic. My first bed was gifted by Compassion, and it was a bunk bed. And it was because when they went to my house, they say, "Okay, the one that is sponsored is Gerald, but his brother is also sleeping on the floor. What about if we buy something that can benefit both of them?" My elementary studies were paid by Compassion International. And you know what? I never met my sponsor in person. But Compassion has something that is called letters. And through the letters, we create a bond of a father and son that I never knew before. And listen, when my father never called me to say something special to me, to say happy birthday or something that can probably help me, my sponsor was always, every year, sending letters to me and letting me know, "Hey, Gerald, we are here in London, United Kingdom, but you know what? We just want to let you know that you are so special for us. We just want to let you know that we are praying for you. We just want to let you know that the Lord has a big plan for you and for your family." And he was right. So today I am married to a beautiful woman from the Dominican Republic. Her name is Vanessa. I got two beautiful baby girls, Valerie and Victoria. Valerie, she is 4 years old, and Victoria, she's almost 2 years old. And one of the goals that I have in my life, it is, and I always say that I learned this because someone one day decided to show me evidence about the love of Jesus Christ. And it is that I'm not going to repeat the same story as my father. So I got two goals in my life, and one of them is that one, and the second one is to be the husband for my wife that my mom never had before. So today I got a bachelor's degree in business management thanks to Compassion International. I got a certification in Christian leadership thanks to Compassion International. I got a paralegal certification at the same time, and I am serving at my church. So, and I always say we are a great example that a whole family can be changing just sponsoring one child. So my father, God allowed me to go to his house, talk to him about the gospel of Jesus Christ, and forgive him. That's the only picture that I have in my entire life with my father. And that was what day when I decided to go to his house, talk to him about the gospel of Jesus Christ, and forgive him. Why, Gerald, you do that? Because when Jesus comes to your life, Jesus changed everything. It is not only to give you food, transportation, or uniform. It is to change everything. So the last things that I want to say is about my mom. A few months ago, someone asked me about, hey Gerald, can you tell me what compassion did for you? And my answer it was, I'm gonna tell you what Jesus Christ is still doing in my life through Compassion International. And it was because my mom, she was diagnosed with something called Chiari malformation type 2. This is like a little tumor in the spinal cord and need to be performed by a brain surgery. And I remember that my mom called me from the Dominican Republic and she said, hey Gerald, there is a doctor here that want to talk to you. He said that there is something serious that he need to tell you. So I remember that I talked to that doctor and he said, okay, your mom has this condition and we need to perform the surgery as soon as possible. If not, she's going to stay in a wheelchair and she's going to start losing her body nerves. So what happened, it was that he said, I can give you the diagnosis, but I don't have a specialty in that kind of surgery. So we need to find a doctor. So I talked to my mom and I say, let's go to the United States and let's try to find a doctor. And I was trying to find that doctor that end in the MD, PhD, and all the D. I always say that because I was trying to find a doctor that can take care of my mom real well. We found a doctor, and that doctor, he say, okay, here is the situation. Your mom, we need to perform the surgery for her as soon as possible. And if not, she's going to start losing her body nerves, etc., etc. So he said, we got a problem. And I say, okay, what is that problem? And he said, the problem is that your mom doesn't have medical insurance here in the United States. And I look at him and I say, well, doctor, that's not a problem. I always say that probably at that time I was thinking in Dominican pesos because, you know, $1 is 55 Dominican pesos. And I look at him and I say, that's not a problem. How much it is? And he said, well, if you have $55,000, we can prepare your money, and in 2 weeks we can perform the surgery for her. So I look at him again and I say, doctor, we don't only have a problem. We now got a big problem. But I remember that I look at my mom and I say, the Lord is going to provide for us. Don't worry. I know that the Lord is going to do something for us. And what happened, it was that my mom went back to the Dominican Republic, and 3 weeks after, she went to see a doctor. She mentioned my name. That person that was there, she said, hey, did you say Gerald Lorenzo? And my mom said, yes. And that person said, was Gerald Lorenzo in Compassion International? And my mom said, yes. And that person said, is Gerald Lorenzo now living in the United States? And my mom said, yes. And that person said, call Gerald, I need to talk to him. So my mom called me, and I remember that conversation because it was from a lady that she started saying, hey Gerald, did you remember when we worked together in the Compassion program? That you were a student business management and I was a student medicine? I say, of course, I remember those times. She said, well, today I am a neurosurgeon. And I'm calling you because I'm going to perform the surgery for your mom that is my mom. So, you know how much do we pay for that surgery? You have an idea? Nothing. $0. And it was because a former sponsored child, someone that was a sponsor for someone by someone from here from the United States, was the person that performed the surgery for my mom. So I want to tell you that when you sponsor a child, you are not only sponsoring a child, you are changing a life as my life. You are transforming a family as my mother, my brother, and I, but at the same time, you are impacting an entire generation as my wife, my baby girls, and all the youth guys that I have the opportunity to work with. So remember that here we got the next neurosurgeon, the next pastor, the next missioner, who knows? But Jesus and the church are more powerful than poverty. And I want to conclude with this, and Pastor, you can come, because I just want to say that it feels so great to say that I have been released from poverty, but more than that, that it has been in Jesus' name. Amen. So thank you so much for having me here. And thank you, Pastor.
Pleasure. So I told you a moment ago we were going to try to release 100 children from poverty in the name of Jesus. And that is the goal we've set. As when I talk to Compassion, they know how many people we already sponsor. We already sponsor a lot of children there, our families do. And so they thought 100 is a pretty good number. I think 100 is a little low because I know WellSpring, but we're debating on that. So 100 was the number we set. But if I could snap my fingers and transport all of us to Ecuador or to the Dominican Republic or to Guatemala or to Honduras, that number would skyrocket. Because if you saw, as I have seen, the difference that a child being inside the program versus outside the program, we'd figure it out. We'd make a way. I can't do that. I can't snap my fingers. I don't have the televangelist jet to load you all in and take you down there. I don't have any of that stuff. So what I've tried to do is bring as many opportunities here for you to be able to see it as possible. I wanted to introduce you to Gerald. We have the huts out there that you can go into and the pods and get an experience that way. If you've not done that yet, sign up for that this afternoon. And I also wanted to show you a video because if we release 100 children from poverty in Jesus' name, in a couple of weeks, those 100 students, those 100 kids will find out what's happened. And I wanted you to know what that looks like. So take a watch.
Nama saya Helena Estibora, umur saya 8 tahun. Saya tinggal di 5 saudara dan 2 orang tua.
Saya tidak bisa menentukan juga, tapi sebagai orang tua kami bersalah. Kami juga tidak mampu untuk melayani yang pasti bersalah kepada Tuhan.
Waktu itu, tetapi saya lebih memilih ketika pendekatan oleh gereja untuk melayani anak-anak, dan di situ saya lihat kemuliaan Tuhan bahwa lebih luar biasa kita melayani anak-anak daripada kita memikirkan hal-hal duniawi.
Sisakan kita ini, walaupun bikin rumah begini itu beban banyak karena arisan ya kita, tapi belum tutup sama sekali arisan ini. Dan saya stres, Asti bilang, jangan stres mama. Saya lega pikiran, saya bang cium sama anak, Asti bilang sama saya. Dan saya cium sama dia, saya bang, saya tidak stres sekarang, saya aman-aman sekarang.
Saya di PPA paling suka buku cerita karena rajin membaca.
Berikan kepada mereka. Terlebih-lebih Helena itu anaknya, kalau saya lihat selama saya mengajar, anaknya pintar dan periang, ceria, dan sering tidak bolos masuk PPA.
Pertama, saya merasa bangga sekali, Pak, karena proses perubahan kita melihat dari penampilan mereka. Karena apa yang kami lakukan bukan hanya dengan kata-kata, tetapi perbuatan nyata. Baik, terima kasih. Fungsi papan data anak untuk mengetahui anak-anak yang terdaftar di PPA, berapa seluruhnya, berapa yang dapat sponsor, dan berapa yang belum punya sponsor.
Dengan dapat sponsor, saya sakit hati karena tidak dapat sponsor.
Tiap kali dia kasih tahu sama saya dari mana saya mau, anak-anak yang lain sudah ada sponsor, saya belum dapat. Dan saya mama berdoa juga, tapi saya tidak pernah dapat. Tunggu anak, tidak mungkin. Nanti Tuhan yang akan. Saya bilang gitu sama dia.
3-4 bulan ke depan bahwa anak-anak ini akan memiliki sponsor melalui tangan-tangan Tuhan untuk menjamah hati para yang bisa peduli kepada anak. Tuhan akan memberikan yang terbaik buat keluarga ini. Ada sukacita, Asti, keluarganya Asti mendapat sponsor, dan ini surat dari sponsor yang buat Asti. Itu juga tidak bayar. Bicara sponsor.
Boleh Asti.
Terima kasih banyak bahwa anak saya baik. Saya kasih masuk PPA. Saya hari ini saya bangga sekali. Tapi Tuhan yang balas. Saya tidak mampu balas, tapi Tuhan yang balas. Tidak pernah saya mimpi bahwa sponsornya Ati hari ini ada. Tapi saya bangga sekali sehingga saya jatuh air mata. Terima kasih banyak, berlimpah-limpah.
Mereka, anak-anak itu merasa dekat dengan sponsornya, dan jadi ketika mereka menceritakan isi surat seperti itu, anak-anak merasa luar biasa bahwa itu tidak bisa dibayangin seperti itu.
Pasti namaku ini dan aku senang menjadi sponsormu.
Mungkin pikirnya ya sekedar komunikasi saja, tetapi lebih daripada itu, kedekatannya lebih dekat sekali. Dan saya berterima kasih kepada Tuhan yang bisa memberikan sponsor kepada anak sebagai anak dan bapak, dan saya berterima kasih kepada Compassion sebagai jembatan yang dapat menghubungkan yang ada di seberang bisa menjadi satu. Itu kebanggaan saya dan saya merasa senang sekali.
Can I just say directly, you're going to want to do this? Like, the Bible is really clear we should never ask anything out of guilt or obligation. I'm not doing that now. We've never done that. I'm not doing that now. But as your pastor, I just want you to know you're going to want to do this. Let me say it differently. I know some of you have very specific reasons why you can't do this. I get it. No guilt, no obligation. You don't have to tell me the story. I understand that's true for some of us. But most of us are going to want to do this. Because there are a few opportunities in life where you can do this much good for this low of a cost, $43 a month. I can't go to Taco Bell hardly for $43 a month, and you can take care of the physical, spiritual, emotional, social. It's just amazing how it works. There are a few opportunities in life where you can live in the U.S. and yet be a missionary overseas at the same time. And most of us are going to want to do this. Let me explain this differently. So with missionaries, now, Christians and churches in developed countries like America can reach out to them, connect with them financially, relationally, pray for them spiritually, all those things, but you never meet the people. You never go to the field, right? I'm visual. Let me spell this out. With typical mission situations, you have the funding on one side, and you have the people on the other, and the missionary is the bridge between the two. But you're over here with the funding. What I'm describing to you today is different. You have the program and you have the people, and you're in the middle. You're the bridge. You're bringing the program to the family, to the child, and you're directly connecting with them. And most of us are going to want to do this. When Amy and I met Maite, we also met a young man that day named Orly. WellSpring has sponsored Orly almost his entire life. He's now 19. And the children's church offering goes to help Orly and 6 other kids through Compassion International. When teens buy soft drinks from the Compassion Cooler, it goes to sponsor Orly and 6 other students. Like, your students' caffeine addiction is literally changing the world. Like, that's happening. So when we're walking up to meet Orly for the first time, he wasn't there by himself. He had his mom with him, and he had a teacher with him from the school because he had traveled 10 hours to get there. This is like the longest trip I think he had ever taken in his life. One of the kids who came, one of the ones that Amy and I sponsored personally, had to walk 2 hours with his mom on foot to get to a place where the roads began so he could hop on a bus and go 8 more hours to meet us. So they have like this whole entourage of people to come meet us. And when we met him, his teacher later told us that as we're walking up, he whispers over to her, "They're real." You see, skepticism is universal. We wonder if there's actually a child on the other end of our sponsorship. They wonder if there's really a person on the other end of the letters. They're real. You know, some of the younger kids that came with from other parts, they didn't know what was happening, but their moms and their teachers who came with them, they knew what was happening. The mamas always know. They know what an impact that sponsorship made. I've been to Ecuador twice now. I can confirm with you with my own eyes that they're real, and the work you're doing, you're being a missionary. You're changing a life. I promise you that. So we met Orly. We FaceTimed Keith and Sherry Budemeyer, which was just remarkable technology for him. You see the kids' offering and the drinks pay for his sponsorship for Orly, but the group didn't write the letters. It's a whole big group. So Keith and Sherry Budemeyer have written him letters for years. And Orly came to meet us with a big binder that had every single letter they had ever sent. It was a huge binder. He kept them all. He treasured every one of them. And so we wanted Orly to be able to meet Keith and Sherry to be able to see Orly, so we FaceTimed them so that they could talk to each other. And I think it's safe to say that it was inspirational for both of them. In fact, if you zoom into Keith's picture there, Keith almost turned into a papaw right there on the spot. It was amazing to watch. And so I thought, what a better person to have tell us what happens next than Keith. So I want Keith to come and let us know about that.
It was odd to hear Orly's perspective because that was my perspective. For the first time, he was real. If you remember those days before you had children and somebody would say, "You don't get it, you haven't had children," and you think, "Yeah, I think I get it." And then the day comes when your child is born and you thought, "I didn't get it at all, but I get it now." And that's what it was to see Orly. It wasn't part of the story there, but the part that really nailed me that day, the part that brought me to tears, is through his interpreter. Orly said, "I thought it was going to be you." That was a hard one. These kids are real. Every one of these packets that you will see today are unique and they are real. That's the only packet for that child in existence. If you were to take that packet home and fail to follow through with it, their packet would disappear for several weeks while they were out of the system until their system alerted them that somebody had disappeared and they'd create a new packet. There is only one packet. I bring 2 packets up here today because I want to point out a couple of important little side items. This is Nicole. Nicole was born August 9th, 2004, which makes her how old? Yeah, I didn't know either. But here's an interesting thing that I just learned yesterday. No child enters the compassion program past the age of 11. I did not realize that. I didn't realize that because there are teen packets all over the place. If you see a teen packet, if you see someone older than age 11, they are in here in a packet because they have lost their sponsorship somehow. Somehow along the way. It might have been the death of the person who was sponsoring that child. It might have been a divorce. And in the divorce, nobody got the kid. It might have been that the family fell on hard times or just decided maybe it wasn't for them. But for some reason, the person who had been their sponsor is their sponsor no more. So if you see a teen, consider that as you kind of weigh out your options. It's going to be a shorter sponsorship by the time they age out, but it can be vital because that is a part of life where so many decisions are made. And it's so key to be in a great godly environment during that. This is this little boy, isn't he a sweet little angel? His name's Angel. I wasn't being, his name's Angel. He has a little clock icon appearing right here on his picture, and that means that he has been waiting for a length of time. Angel has been waiting more than 377 days for a sponsor. He was born in 2017, just a little fella. When you come and get one of these packets, there are 4 tables here, there are a couple tables out in the lobby, you're going to see a 3-part card here. The top part gives the child's name. It might be that the name is undecipherable for you. You don't know gender-wise, but if you look down just on the side, down here in the corner, it'll say whether it's a boy or girl. This gives the basics. I live in Honduras. My birthday is September 11th, 2017. Now, I do remind you that you will see today heavily, almost all of them are from Honduras or Ecuador. That means a child that you choose today to sponsor, child or children, is going to be from our partner churches in those 2 countries, with the hopes that as we develop this ministry in a broader way with church planting, with the survival program for prenatal care, that will also in time include us having occasional trips to the Honduras and to Ecuador to meet our kids in person. If they are in our system, if they are part of our partner churches, they will bring those kids to you so that you can meet them face to face. On the back of that, it gives a reminder of just what the support covers in that child's life. The second card down here gives a little bit of a bio on Angel, on whatever child it is, talks about the family. On the back, talks about that person's community, what their town is like, what their living situation is like. If you would like to sponsor that child, all you have to do, once you select the child that you're going to sponsor, is fill out that card at the very bottom. That's a 2-sided card. And on the front, you'll fill out your personal information and do this very legibly, because while you have a really cool email address with rabidvolsfan6283, nobody down at the Offices of Compassion understands that. So be really legible, because that's going to be important to tie you in there. The information is safe. They've never had any identity stolen from any sort of event like this in all the years that they've done it. This goes directly into an envelope. It will be taken directly to their offices and is safe. And then on the back, it gives you your payment options, how you'd like to set that up. There are several ways to do that. If you would like to do it through a QR code, they have a QR code right here. If you've never used a QR code and don't know how to do that, at the end of the children's wing is a preschool class. They'll be able to tell you how to use a QR code. Now, I will say, we do not want any of these packets to leave the building without them being completed. If you have extenuating circumstances, please consider finding a way to complete this here so that they do not inadvertently get lost in the system. If you do use the QR code, it's probably faster to fill this out physically, to be honest, but if you use the QR code on the front, just make sure your name is here. On the back, write QR code used, and the staff at Compassion will be able to take care of the rest of that. I wanted to remind you this too. You can do more than one kid. You can do 3 or 4. I mean, whatever the Lord leads you to do. If you have multiple kids, just fill one of these out and turn both cards or all three cards or whatever it is into the volunteer at the table, and they will staple them together so you don't have to fill out multiple cards. It might be that your business has done well. It's just not that your family wants to share, but maybe you have a business and they've done well and you want to pass the blessings on. It's fine for a business to be the sponsor. You'll have a contact person, and that's who will do the correspondence. Corresponding with the kids couldn't be easier. You can do it online on Compassion's site, but you can also get the app. The app lets you snap a photo of something that you wish you could share with the kids, immediately go into the app, type a short note, attach the photo, and send it. Done within 5 minutes' time. And that communication is going to arrive just like it was a 10-page letter. It's going to be very, very powerful. Let's say that you are up in years, as I am, or even older possibly, and you think, I don't know that I'm really the person to do this. Believe me, you are the person to do this. But here's an option that I want you to consider. If you have grandchildren and you think, how neat would it be for my grandson or my granddaughter and I to sponsor a child together. I'm going to pay the fund. I'm going to do the financial aspect of it, but we're going to share the letters. We're going to share the responses, and I'm going to pass on this giving legacy that says we take care of people in God's name all across the world. So again, a little key points. We're aiming for at least 100 kids rescued today from extreme poverty. There are no other ways out. We want to be sure to complete these bottom parts and leave them here. We will help you at the table locate if you want a kid that's high risk, that's been waiting for a long time, or that is an older teen and has a harder time getting a sponsor. Remember, each one of these is unique. The wonderful thing about this is that we sometimes go on mission trips, and it's great, and we bring back stories. Sometimes we bring the mission trip to you like we did 2 weeks ago when we built 3 houses in the parking lot, and that was phenomenal. But sometimes in opportunities like this, we raise a missionary as a small child in another country. We show them the love of God, the saving power of God, and that child grows up in their community and becomes a spokesperson for the kingdom. And I think that is how the kingdom comes. If you're not here with us in person, we want to be sure that you understand this is for you as well. If you would text the word WellSpring, it can be uppercase or lowercase, to 83393. You will be connected with children from our partnering churches in Ecuador and in Honduras, and you can be a part of that as well. I'd like to pray for you, and then we're going to invite you to put your feet in motion and take advantage of this chance to change lives all over the world. Heavenly Father, you have been so good to us here. We are so unbelievably overblessed. And we see how the rest of the world lives, or we hear how it lives. And it's hard for us to imagine that it's real. But Father, I ask you today, while our hearts are receptive, to lead us to what you would have us do with the blessings that you have given us. May they never be stored up just inside of us. May they be lavished out with the same grace and the same love and the same hope that you have lavished us. Help us to be a portrait of God as we change the lives of boys and girls, young men and women everywhere, so that the Word of God becomes worldwide. May your kingdom come. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Angel and Nicole will be available at this table right over here. You don't want to miss out on this opportunity.